The HUD's committee will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis.
Present.
Alderwoman Hubbard.
Present.
Alderman Coder.
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Oldenburg.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Boyd. 5 present, you have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today we only have one order of business. It is to accept a report that's kind of a long time in coming from St. Louis Economic Development on our city's economic development plan. For the benefit of those who have not been at one of our meetings, I know it gets a little redundant for our members, but I try to spend a minute and talk about a little bit about where we came from and what we're trying to do, and to reflect back on where we started a couple years ago. When I became chairman of HUD's, we wanted to create a bit of a purpose. So our mission statement was that we're pursuing economic development for the purpose of securing economic viability for the city and the economic well-being of our residents. And to that end, we began starting a look at the how we use incentives, and that grew into a call for an economic development plan, which is what's being presented today. So that was focusing on the economic viability of the city. And then we are now starting to pursue an affordable housing plan for the city. And we've had presentations on that, which will address the well-being of our residents. And the thing that I want to mention today or discuss very briefly before we put our executive director of SLDC on is there is, I think, a thought within many of the city that all we have to do to solve our problems is either cut back on spending or else we need to just raise taxes. We can just go ahead and raise taxes and that'll solve all of our problems. And I really think that that's a flawed approach in today's very, very competitive economic environment where we have one part of the world competing with another part of the world. And even within our country, we have cities competing with each other. And within our region, we're competing both with the state of Illinois and of course, all of the suburban municipalities. And we have to be very, very strategic and thoughtful. And the idea that we as the city of St. Louis can just charge whatever we want in the way of taxes and that's going to solve all of our revenue problems is just really flawed. We've talked about it before in our committee. There's basically 2 ways of raising tax revenue. All the people that are worried about having resources, additional resources to address, equity issues in our city, we have to raise that revenue from one of 2 ways. We either raise taxes or we grow our tax base. And if we can't do it in one of those 2 ways, then we don't have the resources necessary to provide services for our residents and a lot of the social services that we know we could certainly use more of. And if you look back historically, our tax base is continuing to shrink. As the tax base shrinks, we increase taxes, which then make it that much more difficult to grow the tax base because it accelerates the shrinking process. So what we're trying to do or achieve with this economic development plan is becoming more strategic in how we go about growing our tax base. And I want to applaud our executive director and his staff. They've worked very, very hard at doing this, and they've collected a lot of ideas. We, at the leadership of our president of the board, introduced a ordinance, I guess it's been 1.5 years, 2 years ago, calling for an annual report on the plan and the progress towards hitting the plan. And the idea would be is that it would create a built-in accountability where we would, as a body, begin reflecting on, how are we doing in doing this very, very important process of growing our tax base. So with that introduction, this is actually the first of the formal presentations. We've had the plan done informally for us, but I believe this is intended to comply with the requirements of the ordinance, if I'm not mistaken. Is that not correct, Mr. Williams, Otis? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we've had the final draft done. We've also we're just concluded the period for public comment, and so we are now unveiling the final draft with those comments involved and placed in consideration the final document.
And from a standpoint of obligation, are we supposed to take any action on that, or are you just making a presentation today then? Hello? Hello? Otis? Otis? Can anyone hear me?
Chairman, we can hear you. I think we lost
Yeah.
Otis.
I think it's Otis's feed.
Okay. I wasn't sure if he was talking and I wasn't hearing him. Otis, I think if you unmute yourself, Otis.
I apologize. I did not mute myself. I'm not sure how I got muted. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. And the question before you presented was, after you present, is there any obligation of our committee? Are we supposed to take an action, or is this just a report?
Today is a report, but the ordinance did require that we provide you with a report or document, if you will, on an annual basis. And so the email that you all received included the report plus a copy of the briefing slides that I will go through today. I think I'll leave it to the board as to whether or not you need to formally adopt it or not, but this is in response to the ordinance 70748.
Okay, thank you. Well, why don't you go ahead and proceed, and then we'll provide committee members an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.
While staff is sharing screen and pulling things up, let me just say that this has been a real team effort and that we have had a lot of participation. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Don Rowe, Linda Martinez, Matt Moak, for their assistance, but also the folks on my staff, Dale Russetts, Rob Orr, Matt Bauer, and Jonathan Ferry, who served as the project manager for our efforts here on the project on our equitable economic development and growth framework. And so the consultants that assisted us in this process was Mass Economics, led by Teresa Lynch and her team. And so we want to say thanks to that group as well. And so can I have Matt or John or someone bring up the first slide for me?
This is Matt. I can go ahead and share my screen.
Thank you. Okay, Matt, if you can go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the outset, the purpose and objective of today's presentation is to provide a report to the Board of Aldermen per the requirements of the Ordinance 70748. In that request or in that ordinance, it required that we provide detailed information about the demographics, both the economic overview and an economic growth strategy. It also asked that we report back on the outcome of the Equitable Economic Development Framework. Next slide. So per the ordinance, under the demographic overview, we were to provide a profile of the city and the subsections of neighborhoods in the areas of population, household income levels, impact of poverty, education levels, and all the demographic data. And you have in your report, you have information that will provide those details through 2018. Next slide, please. This is on the local economic overview, sort of a detailed overview of the city's economic drivers. And so, as you can see, we looked at joblessness, the largest government employers in the city. So it's a whole litany of slides that will show you the outcome, and we will touch a few of those later in this presentation. The next category was the economic growth strategy, and this is based on the ordinance. We moved to hire a consultant and to go through the process of interacting with the public and getting feedback and developing the economic growth strategy. Next slide, please. So on the economic growth strategy, the one thing that has happened is that we started our process about 18 months ago, and while this process was going on, the parallel plans were being developed. And so fortunate for us, many of the consultants that were working on some of these parallel plans also were working for us or interacted with us. And so we've been able to, I won't say synchronize, but we have been able to be informed of each of these plans, and our plan is reflective of the outcomes of all of these plans. The last plan on this list, St. Louis Economic Development Plan, is actually a regional plan that has been chartered by Civic Progress, and it is still in progress. It is not complete, but they have interacted with us, and they have reviewed and had discussions with our consultants and with us. And so we are informing their plan, if you will, as they move to finalize their plans. But working with the Design Downtown, the Brick Line Greenway, Metro North and South Transit Oriented Development Plan, Cortex, not on this plan, but a lot of movement and changes at T-Rex. GeoFutures, which is taking advantage of the retention of the NGA with the Geospatial Strategic, and again, the regional plan, the St. Louis Economic Development Plan. Next slide, please. So early on, we developed an advisory group of about 45 people, of 45 citizens, and that reflected, a very diverse group that were able to advise us during the process. And out of that came the framework aims, and we thought that we would have a group, at least 4 to 5 things that were at the 30,000 foot level, if you will, that essentially were things that we should aspire to here in the city. First one was to grow the city's population by 30,000 people by 2030. The next was exceed the national growth rate in jobs and payrolls among our key industries, and close the wage and employment gaps for ethnic minorities, and achieve a sustainable long-term tax revenue growth for the city. So with that being the, I call it the umbrella, we then move to, next slide, please. Well, let me digress a minute and just talk about the input, the public input that was involved. So we did go to great lengths to have people involved in this process. And so this chart here just gives a list of of various avenues by which we had engagement. We held 2 public meetings, a host of neighborhood meetings, online surveys. We also involved many folk who were the 1,300 people that were in attendance at the mayor's luncheon last year, and an online survey while for the attendees. Talked to high school students. So it was a very broad spectrum. In addition, when we completed the next to last draft, we then went to a public comment period, which began July 28th. That period lasted for 30 days, ended August 28th, and we received a lot of good feedback, and we have been interacting with a number of the folk that provided some of that feedback, and will consummate some of the recommended changes that they provided. So in addition to that, we did have 4 formal meetings with the Board of Aldermen, 4 opportunities to meet with the Board of Aldermen, in addition to separate meetings with Aldermen to have discussions about both the input and some of the recommended changes. Next slide, please. So the goals of the Economic Development Framework, we came up with 10. So we had the 4 overarching goals, or the aims that we had, but these are the goals of the Economic Development Framework. And on this page are 5 of them. They're reflective as a sort of a subset of what our aims are. So I'm not going to read all these to you, but these are the first 5. And if we go to the next slide, you can then see the second set of goals. And from these goals came our strategies and recommendations. So the title of our framework is Equitable Economic Development Framework. And that title is intentional with the idea to promote the idea that this is a framework or a plan that is to focus on all citizens in the city of St. Louis, and to have an intentional focus on places where we have not seen had a great deal of redevelopment or have citizens that have been involved in the process. And so in order for us to advance and to have growth, we have to attack the problems that we have found in the city. And in the framework in our study, we found a number of those areas, and we have recommendations on how we might quote, move towards solving. It will take a whole team. It is not one office or one team that will solve it. It will take a host of folks. And so when we get to the recommendations and strategies, and if you read our report, you can see that we have identified a lead for each of the actions with and sometimes co-leads or partners that would be working to help solve the problem. So next slide, please. So the framework had identified 232 action items, and we just subdivided those into 3 main categories: clusters, which had 32 strategies; places, 43 strategies; and opportunity to thrive with 18 strategies. Next slide, please. Under opportunity to thrive, this is a focus on how I call it city building, but also focusing in on the people and some of the issues that we have in the city. But first among those is population retention and growth. And so you can see the various aspects of opportunity to thrive, to include home ownership. How do we improve that for all of our citizens? Anti-displacement policies, growing the African-American middle class, marketing to prospective residents. And so the whole idea is to stem the loss of our population and focus on trying to grow the population. And we see opportunities in this group. looking at diverse entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship opportunities, and figuring out how to support an ecosystem for scalable minority-owned businesses, trying to improve financial accessibility and small business support. So there are recommendations on the creation of some funds to be able to assist businesses, and so that is in our framework. Then looking at employer practices, support for entry and middle wage employees. And so it's looking at how the employer interacts with the employee and vice versa to sort of improve the plight of the employee in many cases, and the ability for employees to be an added asset, if you will, to the various businesses. And the big deal here is tracking neighborhood outcomes. Next slide, please. Under the cluster of focal points, this is city building, and it is transportation, distribution, logistics, manufacturing. So what we have are some of our traditional clusters here, along with some of the new clusters to include geospatial. But city building is a new one, and we will focus on that. There are some city and regional cluster specialization that we are aware of, but and that includes the business retention and expansion function that we work with the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership on, as well as the Alliance STL. And there are other regional partnerships that we will focus on as well. Next slide, please. On the place priorities, this is looking at planning and management, and many of you are aware that the Planning Urban Design Agency has an initiative to facilitate planning in various neighborhoods, and they will be working with various neighborhood groups and aldermen to get that schedule. Obviously, can't do every neighborhood at one time, so there's a schedule, and that a part of that will be sort of a kickoff. But also, we're looking at how to ensure that there are viable neighborhood organizations in each of our communities that we can, as the economic development entity, that we can land on and work with. Land assembly to ensure that we have a plan to have sites that are ready for businesses to land on, or those that we're working to attract and those that are looking to expand. Looking at the employment districts all over, and so we identify the various employment districts and the employment centers, as well as the commercial corridors. And I think the next slide is a map that, go to the next slide, please. Within the report, you will find various maps. This is one of them that essentially shows in the gray here where the employment centers and districts are located. The sort of orange stripes shows the corridors and the efforts that we will hopefully working with the elected officials, but the neighborhood groups focus in on some of these corridors. Next slide, please. As an example, this is looking at employment centers, and you on the left side, you see the various characteristics that we're looking at, but then you also see across the top the employment centers and the characteristics that each of these may need or where they're focused. Go to the next slide, please. So what are some of the expected impacts of our framework? So on the positive side, we are hopeful that we will have population and job growth. And we lay out a foundation for improving job growth, in the various targeted industries, and hopefully improving the neighborhood and population growth. So the second one is diverse impact and equity. throughout the framework, the tone is set for us to intentionally focus in on inclusion of minorities and disadvantaged populations. And we hope this lead to a lasting change. The second one is increased transparency. And so we're developing various mechanisms so that those who want to know what is happening can be able to find it online, or be able to track, particularly if it's an incentive, how we are investing and what has been the results of that investment. And then it is this framework is a proactive approach in the sense that we've identified the various actions, potential actions, and also have identified potential leaders for those, but we welcome others to participate and join, and in some cases could navigate to be the lead in some of those. So, but this is a proactive approach. It is not a reactive approach as we have been in the past. Next slide. From a negative side, it is impacted by COVID. And so the majority of the framework is completed prior to COVID. So all of our work was done. And as many of you know, the impact of COVID has been tremendous, and to the changes to remain relevant. And the next one is expectations. This is not a silver bullet. And there are a lot of actions here, 232 actions, 93 strategies. And we have to be realistic about how we address them, and that we aren't going to get them all solved, or we won't be able to start them all even on day one. There are some short-term things that we can address immediately, and we have identified some of those. But this is a long-term, in the case of long-term, at least 5 years to be able to get all of these underway and see some results starting. The next is that this framework is primarily focused toward business and economic development, and it doesn't focus in on many of the housing concerns. But housing will not be lost in this. It's just not the top priority of the framework, but it does include a look and a need, understanding that we need to take advantage of the vacant properties and vacant land that we have. The next one is workforce and education. We have to figure out how to ensure that we have appropriate education. I call it STEM. We have to be able to fill this equity gap, and that we have to ensure that our citizens are prepared to be able to enter the workforce. And so that is a process. It's not necessarily negative. It just shows that we have a need here that we need to overcome. Next slide, please. Moving to the economic growth, there are essentially some laws, policies, and practices that we were asked to identify that might be something that we can look into, both from a legislative perspective, a policy perspective. And I'll start here first with land and development. The first two are expand the state toolbox for environmental remediation. I've always said that in St. Louis, with the 61, 62 square miles, almost every square mile, there's something has been built on it, probably maybe even in Forest Park, there was something there, but we have built on all of these of this square footage and square miles. And as a result, in order to build new, we will have to address, in most cases, some environmental issue. The second one is identify forward-looking policies that de-risk new development for parcels or specific geographies. The next slide, please. Under transportation, we want to support policies to increase state gas tax, increase funding for transit, and look at policies to bridge gaps in transit service and access. And I know Alderman Rhodey has a real interest in solving the transportation issue, understanding that it impacts the overall cost of economic development and also the cost of operations. This is where we are considering and establishing a common policy platform for transportation. So next slide, please. On the small business and entrepreneurs, restore funding for the Missouri Technology Corporation. And this is needed in order to help our innovation centers continue to move forward. So at the state level, a lot of the funding that supports Cortex and T-Rex and all of the other innovation facilities in the city, this is a tool or a location that can provide funding. Unfortunately, the state has gutted this fund for the most part, and so we need to restore funding such that it can be a very competitive resource, as it is in many other states that are succeeding. Create a just and equitable state level requirement for this is the community CRA lending, which is about the banks having a requirement to support the redevelopment within their area of operation. Next slide, please. Workforce and people, create a city outpost for Missouri Missouri and Illinois universities and institutions of higher education. And so the idea that many of the very prominent universities will have if they are main campus located here, that they will have an outpost here to help us focus on many of the things that we like to move forward, especially in geospatial and software tech. We work with the state to create a state level platform for tracking diversity and inclusion data and incomes, and that's a resource that would be very helpful for us to be able to continue to provide reports to you all. Next slide, please. On housing, reform the state property tax to enable property tax deferrals and freezes. And that is primarily as a result of where we are in time here with COVID. Create a landlord licensing program and establish a statewide moratorium on evictions. These are sort of outgrowths of where we are currently with COVID. Next slide, please. Coalition building and coordination. Create a coalition of urban areas to coordinate policy advocacy to the state level. And this is an effort for us to take advantage of the growth in the ag tech environment. At 39 North, things are definitely growing. We see ourselves as being, there could be I call it an urban component to the ag area. And so we need to be able to take advantage of that, particularly from a technology perspective. And so this could be an avenue for more growth and jobs. Next slide, please. So we run through. I'm going to run through quickly here some of the slides that where we show data that you ask us for. In the reports that you all received, you have more detail. You will have more slides around a particular topic than I'm going to show you today. So the slide packet that you have, in the report that you have, there are over 100 pages of data and information for you to peruse through. Next slide, please. Beginning with, this is a slide that shows the population and race over time. It goes from 2008. You asked for us to show data over a 10-year period. So this is 2008 to 2018. Next slide, please. This is showing the population change by race, and so you can see that for African American is the greatest loss of population within the city during this period. Next slide. The population by geography. In the South are 56%, but a combination of the North and Central. You can see here where there is smaller populations. So it's very dense in the South and not so dense in North and Central. Next slide. Okay, population growth by age. I think these charts can speak for themselves. Next slide. The demographic overview of poverty and the next slide, please. And poverty by race. So the blue line in this case is the city of St. Louis. The orange is a U.S. average. And as you can see, the issue here is the poverty for African Americans and Hispanics. And so one of the reasons, again, it validates our goal of intentionally focusing on equity and diversity. The poverty concentrations, you can see in North St. Louis, almost 94% of the population lives in that definition of poverty. And the city total, over 52%, or at least 52% are at the poverty level. Next slide, please.
Otis, just to clarify that's the percentage of people living within poverty tracks, census tracks with a greater than 25% poverty. It's not people that are actually in poverty. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for the correction, Matt. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. There we go. Okay, so this is the overview of education attainment. The one thing that it shows, though, by 2018, we have a large group of very well educated people with at least a bachelor's degree of high or higher. So that a part of our population has grown. And also that less than a high school education seems to be going down. So there are some trends there, but there's still a need for some college and high school equivalency and high school graduations there. But this shows a positive growth of a bachelor's degree or higher attainment amongst our population. Next slide. This is educational attainment by race, and you can see the various
Otis, we lost you. Great. We lost Otis.
He looks as though he's not connected.
Okay, I am back. Thank you. All right,
Okay.
so let's go to the next slide, Matt. There you go. And this is wages by race. Next slide, please. And this is an overview of households that are the household change that we have here in the city, with the orange line showing the family households. And as you can see, there's a decrease by 2018 in family households. This is showing household type growth. Essentially, the categories here are non-family without children, family households without children that are greater than 18 years old and less than 18 years old, and households with children that are less than 18 years old. Okay, this is households with children under 18 years old. Okay, next slide. So let's move to the economic overview. This shows unemployment by race. Again, with, in this case, the green is the city, blue is the MSA, and the orange is the US. And again, shows the disproportionate number for Black African-American families here in the city. Okay, housing affordability. This is looking at a housing cost burden and comparing owner-occupied spending versus renter spending over time. Okay, next slide. And this is a look at the city's GDP growth. And the scale on this is such that it shows a tremendous variation, but you can see the number went from a high of a little over 32 million down to 28.5. That is where the city's GDP growth is. Okay, next slide, please. This is the GDP comparison. The line on the bottom in this case is St. Louis City as compared to the MSA, Missouri, and the US. Okay. Next slide, please. Taxable sales, the top 10 industries. In this case, you can see a great dependency on service industry. In this case, restaurants, hotels, supermarkets show the lion's share of the taxable sales. And consequently, you can also see that those are the ones that are most impacted by COVID, or particularly initially during the March-April timeframe. This shows the total taxable sales. Over the 10-year period. Next slide. And this is an economic overview of the city finances. And I'm sure the alderman understand the lag here, because Paul Payne can show you both 19 and 20 and what his forecast is as far as consequence of COVID, but this is up to 2018. Next slide, please. Just a quick summary of some of the activity by SLDC. We over the last calendar year, 2019, we approved through our board 25 projects. These projects were subsequently approved by the Board of Aldermen, all but one of them. And as a result of the activity here at SLDC, these are the jobs, the number of residential units, the commercial square footage, and hotel rooms that were approved. We have not heard that any of these have been canceled as a result of COVID. Some are delayed for various reasons and obvious reasons, but these are pretty much still being reviewed and about to move forward. But because of COVID, I believe that there is a review, particularly of hotel and the need for hotels. So I do see a significant delay in that area as we move forward. Can we move to the next slide, please? These were the incentivized projects by ward in 2019. This is I call it a deep dive by ward on the activity. The next slide, please. So this slide shows the building permits from 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020 all over the city. And the scale of the map does not allow for you to actually see this significant number that's here. But these are building permits over $50,000 that were permitted in the city. And go to the next slide, please. When COVID hit, there were a number of activities that occurred, and since that time, we have approved and issued loans to 135 loans to businesses at $5,000 each. It was about a $675,000 effort. We're in the process of providing 800 grants to 800 businesses. To date, we have issued 750, but I think we have approved at least 800 of those, 800 grants. The issue that we have is getting the recipients of these grants to pass the CBI clearance, so that is having confirmation that they have paid their taxes or have a license within the city. And so we think by the end of this month that we will have all 800 of those grants issued. We're at 750 at this point. We hosted 3 webinars to discuss the SBA loans. At the time, this was very important, both the EIDL and the PPP. We also held a webinar on opportunity zones to assist some of the businesses there. And that was about 400 businesses that participated in all of those webinars. We met with and counseled over 200 individual businesses during this time frame. And hopefully many of you have also received a periodic email bulletin and update where we provide hopefully useful information to the various businesses. And these are businesses that have a license here in the city of St. Louis. So that's the activity to support businesses during this time period. Next slide, please. This is a slide to just show the overall where we are as far as this 150 that we have approved of loans and grants, where they are over the city. And I'm going to, the next two slides are going to be sort of a close-up. We're going to go north first, and you get a better sense. Go to the next slide, please. This is a look at the area just north of Del Mar, the number of grants that are loans and grants that have been issued there. And then the next slide, please. And this is a look at the area essentially south of Del Mar in the southern area. We are able to show you the number of businesses that applied, the number that were provided. One of our goals in this process was to ensure that at least 50% of the grants were provided to businesses that were located and in the promise zone or in a NARSA area or an opportunity zone. And so we have, I think we're currently at about 54% of all of the loans that we have provided are in one of those areas. Next slide, please. Again, just to show that we're continuing to do business. These are some of the projects that are just completed, or and then if you go to the next slide, you will see those that are under construction. Go to the next slide, please. Those that are highlighted in yellow were started in the last 6 months. I guess the point of showing you this is just that activity is continuing and that we are continuing to work with various developers. But I will go to the next slide for me. But I will conclude here by saying that the purpose of this is not to, is for us to impart to you that we want to see activity all over the city. And so to that degree, you will see some reorganization of and additions to the SLDC staff and development staff to focus in more closely to neighborhoods. We will be working over the next 2 to 3 months to align an implementation plan for the framework, and we will be working with trying to help establish community groups where there are non-existent, and to work more closely with those that are in play already. And so, and to work more closely with you all, the elected aldermen and elected officials that work in these various areas. So, Mr. Chairman, those are this is the report that we provide. Again, I bring to your attention that we provided an electronic copy of both the written report that provided as required by the ordinance, but we also provided you with a copy of all of the slides that I presented here today. So questions?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We appreciate that. Let's go through my committee list here. Here we go. Where is my committee list? Is Alderman Boyd present? Why don't we start off with him? I think he's the most senior member. I guess Alderman Boyd is not present. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble. Too many windows open here. Here we go. Okay, Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions?
I do have one question. Otis, could you expound a little bit more on how you're going to work with establishing or organizations to assist in the neighborhoods? Because right now, I think what we have is we have about 4 or 5 groups that work in different sectors of the city. And all of them are not necessarily tooled properly, nor can they provide the services that are needed for the particular area that they're assigned to. So how are you going to go in and evaluate that and strengthen those opportunities for us to have assistance?
Alderwoman, we don't know exactly yet how to do that, but we know that we will have to do that in concert with with you all, the elected officials in the group. One, identifying all of the organizations that you just identified that are, that are working. But I think that we will also establish what I call the necessary tools that groups would need to be able to work in an area. But this is one of those where we don't know yet exactly what that looks like. We do know, though, that when we SLDC, we will organize to have a person that will be intentional in working with those groups and organizations. So our goal is not necessarily so much to be the one to establish, but to work with people to establish those groups. But we will have a point of contact that will live and breathe every day, what is happening in areas, and coordinate with the groups and organizations that are already in existence. So this does not impact, the neighborhood improvement specialists or the folks that are working, the various analysts in CDA or PDA or whatever. But it is our goal to be able to interact with those folks to make sure that services are provided.
Well, okay. If you're going to have intentional people, that's good to hear. Also, one of the things I've been paying attention to processes, and I probably have one of every style going on in different neighborhoods. So the ones that are, I think, most productive and you have more buy-in and ability for communities to move forward is where the decisions are resident driven with technical assistance. And that seems to, for me anyway, it seems to work better versus an entity coming in and saying, this is what you'll do. You do it my way or no way, and then create division and all that within a community. That doesn't work. And I tell you who does it well when they come in with a process is the style of Great Rivers Greenway. They actually work with community instead of bringing things in and saying, this is what we're doing, and you just have to get on board. So I like their style.
Well, we hope to be able to learn from that. And so part of what we also will do is, I call it the educational arm, where we will create opportunities to not only provide opportunities for learning by community groups, but our staff as well. And so, but I'm aware of the Great Rivers Greenway public engagement process, and we hope to be able to learn from that, to institute some of that as well.
Okay. And my last thing is I really want to thank you all for this, because within this document, when we are looking at new development in our wards, this is going to be a strong tool for the developers and others to see what that community looks like in the surrounding areas and the challenges that they may have. So this really takes us a step further when we're talking about doing something. So I appreciate this, along with the market value study that was done on real estate. Those two things are great tools for us to work with.
Well, thank you, Alderwoman.
All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Next, Alderwoman Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you, Otis, as well. for bringing forth a lot of this information that I think we already knew it, especially as far as all the stats and stuff and the demographics. I think we all have been wrapping our heads around that a long time, and it looks really good in presentation format. It's polished. The language and the narrative is there, but I guess for so many years when we've had so many plans and we haven't seen the results in this city, you know, it leaves you with little hope that things will get better. I'm always hopeful, but I guess I just would like to see some more specific stuff outside of a presentation. I would like to see some concerted efforts to go above and beyond to increase development in North St. Louis. It appears to us, and mind you, I know I have a lot of development taking place in my ward, but when small developers or small companies want to invest in our communities, there's so much red tape, and I think that there's not enough assistance to really help them navigate the process of doing development in our wards. And I just hope that I pray that you have the staff to do it, or your staff is equipped to do it. But in areas that are impoverished, that need a lot of help, they may not be major developers with multi-millions of dollars, but I would just like to see the Development Corporation go above and beyond to assist, because I think as far as North St. Louis, you know, it's going to take a lot of work to overturn 60 years of disinvestment. So if we start at a block at a time with a developer that may only can do 2 or 3 residential units, I just would like to see a lot of the effort steered that way, because although these major projects, they do add to, you know, our economic engine, but when you're trying to transform a city, especially a side of a city that has been forgotten about, I think we need to go above and beyond, you know, outside of just these meetings and these plans, you know, and these designations. I think we need to start seeing it, because in my short tenure, I haven't seen it. And I know some of my colleagues that have been way longer than me, they haven't seen it. And another thing that I would like to comment about, Alderwoman Davis, she mentioned it some. I really have a problem when some of these organizations come in our wards and the efforts are resident driven, and, you know, they start doing projects and we only hear about it on the back end when we hear from LRA that they're going to sell the lots. And then when you dig more, you find out that they are receiving CDA funds to do these projects, and the alderperson hasn't been consulted at all regarding this. That's a problem for me, and I don't know if I guess that's how you all have been doing business over there, but I think that's an issue, because when you're looking at housing stock in the community, or you're looking at development, you have to see if that's something that the neighborhood would be welcoming. And then, you know, if a person has had this opportunity several times to do something and they haven't done it, then I think that that's something that we need to start discussing. You know, it's different when you have legal woes and you can't produce, but, you know, when you're just sitting holding property, and then, you know, the city is going above and beyond to continue to work with you, then I think, if nothing else, the alderperson should be involved in that process, because if not, then it's an additional problem like we've been dealing with a long time since I've been elected. So I would hope that in your leadership some way that type of stuff would change, because you can't expect us to make these votes on things when we aren't being engaged in the process at the very local level, you know, in the best interest of the residents. And so that's all I have regarding this. I'm glad that we appear to have some type of comprehensive plan, but I guess I'm kind of frustrated with all the plans and all the slideshows and everything when we're not really seeing that development take place at the level that is taking place in other parts of the city. And that's all I have.
Alderwoman Hubbard, let me respond and just say we welcome your engagement, and the result of us actually starting this framework process. We have been interacting with just a large number of groups in North St. Louis. We've had tremendous discussions now with a group with North Star groups in the Ville at around Friendly Temple, and the folks at Better Family Life, Tabernacle group, Alderman Collins Muhammad brought in a couple of groups, Alderman Bosley. So we are starting that process of trying to engage, and also worked with Alderwoman Pam Board about a particular project that she is interested in. Obviously, I'll be the first to say that we can do better and that we should have done better. But this hopefully will help us as quote as we reorganize a bit within the department, but also try to engage better with you all. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Spencer's recognized for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you might have skipped over our colleague, Alderman Coder, but I'll just be brief here and say that I appreciate the presentation here. I feel like we're looking at this in a bit of a vacuum without looking at the St. Louis region, without looking at national standards, cities, and where our economic growth compares to the rest of the region and other cities in a similar capacity. You know, it's alarming to me that over the last 10 years of economic expansion, St. Louis, the region has failed to capitalize on that national economic activity, and we have paled in comparison to many other cities in that growth. And so when we're looking at strategies of how to make our city, looking at those population decrease numbers and trying to flip those around so that we aren't seeing loss in our population numbers, but identifying those ways in which other cities are being able to do that. So I just would like to see us looking at St. Louis not just in a vacuum and just as you know ourselves over time, but compared to other peer cities and looking at national averages and things of that nature.
Alderman, let me respond to that by saying that we started our process by doing just that. So we picked out, I think it was 5 or 6 peer cities to do an evaluation. And so that was the basis for starting a closer look at us internally and trying to figure out how to, and we took advantage of things that so you may find in the recommendations that we have that some of the things that were recommended was based on what has been successful in some other locations, but we geared it toward the realities of where we are in St. Louis. So your point is well taken. You know, we do need to be sure that we aren't doing things in a vacuum, which is also the reason that we wanted to partner with other groups in the region who were looking at doing improvements that we identified. But currently we are working with the St. Louis Economic Development Plan, which is a plan that's chartered by Civic Progress that looks at both sides of the river and the MSA to talk about what improvements that might be. But they're also looking at what we have found in our plan and the other plans that have been going parallel to this as well. And so your point was well taken, and what we will and what we're trying to do is ensure that we aren't looking at ourselves in isolation and only looking at that, but how we fit into the region. So one of the things that the Economic Development Plan for that Civic Progress has fostered is another look at our peer cities and regions. And so that is ongoing.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Actually, I did skip over the alderman from the 7th Ward. He had messaged me that he wanted to pass. So just so you're aware. Alderman Oldenburg is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Williams and SLD staff. I want to thank you guys for this succinct kind of executive summary of the plan. Having worked in community and economic development for 15 years, I'm happy and hopeful that that the city has an economic development strategy or barometer to follow. It's something I think that's a long time coming. The alderman from the 5th, I certainly understand her point as well, though, because I think there is nothing worse than a plan that doesn't get followed. So I do also appreciate the exhausting amount of work around existing conditions, because believe it or not, that's something that has not been really cataloged. I know that you folks have all done a good job in the past of having the data, but it hasn't ever been centralized and analyzed for what we need to do in the future. So this lays out, and this plan provides us with that opportunity. So I'm most excited about that. And you guys know, as practitioners in this field, that's a big part of the foundation that's needed. Is what the heck do we have? Where are our asset classes clustered? Where are our job growths clustered? And then how do we learn from that in the go forward? So this is a very exciting endeavor we're embarking upon. My question really does involve around where Alderwoman Hubbard was coming from, is how do we ensure that SLDC, the planning department, the folks in zoning and code enforcement, that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction, that this is sort of the sacrosanct barometer to follow. Again, we may need to amend it and call audibles along the way, but I want to make sure that operationally we execute on making sure that this does become the reference point on a go forward, and that there's buy-in with all the city agencies and not just SLDC. So that my question really goes to how do we harness that to ensure that we are all rowing in the same direction?
Well, the good thing, Alderman, is that we have had a lot of close work with PDA, with CDA, with the budget office.
Good.
So a lot of that has already begun, and I think it is incumbent upon us, as we start to develop our implementation plan, that we reach out to the quote other departments. I think we have a good working, development agency has a good working relationship with the other departments, and as we need them and provide them with our request or ask, they are always there to support us. And so but to incorporate them early on in the plan, and us being able to work with the community organizations, I think that that's part of our discussion. I think the second part of the discussion, though, is resourcing economic development in the city of St. Louis. And so for the most part, we're either funded with a community development block grant that comes with a lot of restrictions, or we aren't funded at all to do economic development. And so I think that has to be a discussion about funding of economic development, and how that will enhance the operations and future of bringing in more tax resources, bringing in more economic development, helping businesses to expand and retain.
Yeah, Mr. Williams, I completely agree with that, and I think we can all put our heads together to figure out, can we find a dedicated revenue stream for the advancement and the leveraging of more economic development resources. So that's something I'd like to work really closely with you guys on and figure out, something absent of a tax scheme, but something that will provide, continuous resource that would stimulate more economic activity through the platforms that you guys all have, but just no dedicated source of funds. I hear that loud and clear. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. Mr. Williams, thank you.
Can I just make one point? I just want to be clear that I speak for for SLDC, and obviously the department heads for the other departments will all come to the table. But thus far, we have had great support, and we have had a lot of interaction with the department heads, and most notably, we've interacted on the plan with PDA and with CDA as I indicated, and with the mayor's office with Linda Martinez. It's been a group effort as we move forward.
Yeah, and the other thing, and I will close actually this time. The other thing I will note that is encouraging here is there are checkpoints in with this committee and with the Board of Aldermen to assure that the plan is being adhered to, and if it's not, what are the complications to that? And you're no stranger to the HUD's committee, you and your staff, Mr. Williams. So we'll look forward to constant updates on this as we go forward. So I appreciate you all.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Boyd, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I want to thank Otis because I'm thanking you because you all have opened your minds and started to look at things differently, clear what Alderman Hubbard is saying. And so me being a newbie, still looked at as a newbie, I have learned a lot in these 3 years from this HUD committee and from SLDC. The senior alder people, as Alderman Davis, has helped me to understand the development process and the patience that it takes to get things done and go through. And I am in agreement that we used to have a phrase that we didn't need a white guy with a suit to come in and tell us what our community needed. The community knows what they need. We just need people to listen. And so I think you all have got that part of it. And you think that you're listening to people, and people are under the impression that older people don't do anything and they just sit around, but trust me, no, we work harder, especially when we're trying to get development in our community. And so it's an uphill battle. And I agree with the previous speakers, but it has to be a partnership. It can't be a tunnel vision and one person think they're just leading the train. So I appreciate you all for listening to me, because a lot of times I would get frustrated. And Alderman Davis would always tell me, you need to slow down. It's gonna happen. And I guess, as Alderman Hubbard said, for so long, we didn't have anything. And so when you get in, you're like, I'm trying to do something to show, it is something that's viable in our community. So I just want to thank you all for just stop and listening. And as my friend has said, Greg Carter has said a long time ago, we did a sustainable neighborhood plan. He said, I hope this doesn't become a bookend. And so we're making sure that plan goes forward. And that's what I hope you all do. It doesn't become a bookend. And we take this plan and we work it to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. That's concludes the committee members. I didn't know if either of the, it looks like we have a couple older people here who are not on the committee. I didn't know if they had any questions or not. It looks like I see the Alderwoman from the 26th. Did you have any questions, Alderwoman? Or Alderman?
Good morning. No questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, that concludes it. I guess my one comment would be is we've had a lot of great new development activity in the last couple of years, but if you take a look at those numbers, it's still pretty, grim in the sense that we still haven't recovered to pre-2010 levels, both in GDP and tax collections and a number of other things. So, we got a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of nice things that have happened in the last couple of years, but that does not replace the fact that we've had 60 or 70 years of disinvestment. I see now that the Alderman from the 22nd has joined us. Alderman, did you have any questions or comments? You're muted.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I'm late and pretty much missed the presentation, but I'll go back and watch it on YouTube.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. Mr. Williams, or Otis, are we expected to pass this or adopt it or anything, or?
Mr. Chairman, I am not sure of the next step for, I think maybe we'll have a conversation with the city councilor and determine whether or not by direction of the ordinance 70748, whether there was an expected approval or maybe it's just a receipt of the report and acknowledgement that we provided it is all that's needed.
All right, well, I'll wait to hear guidance from you on our next step. And I guess I have been advised by our clerk that we have omitted the adoption of our last meeting's minutes. So at this point, if I could accept a motion to adopt our last meeting's minutes, which of course I can't give you the date because I've gone ahead and closed that window again.
I move to approve the minutes dated July the 8th, 2020.
I am glad that we have somebody well organized. It's been moved and seconded.
Who seconded?
Pam Boy.
Okay. Thank you.
Now that it's been moved and seconded, we'll send a motion for the approval of last meeting's minutes. Yeah, Madam Clerk, please call the roll. I'm sorry.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Davis,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard,
Aye.
Alderman Coder, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Oldenburg,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey,
Aye.
Alderman Coder, Alderwoman Spencer. 6 aye votes.
Okay, by your vote, we've approved the minutes from our last meeting, and our next meeting will be on October the 14th, and I think we have a collection of zoning bills that are supposed to be heard then. And I believe that, I'm sorry, I have to check if it's the 21st of October. We do know that we have, the next meeting is going to be, unless we have an emergency or something, October the 14th. So if you want to put that on your calendar, we know that for sure. And with no further business, we'll consider today's meetings adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.